fans, I'm the Blood Guy. Welcome back to another review. And it's been a while since I've done an actual movie, not like a serial killer film or a documentary. But this is a film that it came out last year, or it premiered at festivals last year, and it just was released to Shudder and theaters earlier this year. And it was one that I did not even know was a thing. I did not know this movie was coming out. Once it finally came out, I kind of heard the word of mouth of it, which was either people loved it or they hated it. And in the world of the internet, people fucking hated it, which made me think, okay, it's probably a really smart, well-made film, because that's just how modern audiences are. I had heard how this film was presented as far as shots and audio, kind of what it was about. Never watched a trailer, never looked up any stills. I had seen the poster, that's about it. And we finally watched it last night on, I think we rented it on YouTube, because this was a movie that there was some sort of technical issues where while it was premiering around the festivals, there was some kind of technical issue, so it was leaked onto the internet. That's how a lot of people got to see it, and it generated this buzz. It's actually a very similar story to 2016's Lights Out, which I'll say I liked this more than Lights Out, but and I know people are going to scoff when I say that I liked this film, but it is Skinamarink, which I've heard a lot of the complaints about how it was shot, how a lot of the shots look, the audio, how it looks, sort of the lack of narrative, lack of plot. Even though I saw one, I could tell what they were trying to do, but yeah, there's a lot of ambiguity. But I think there's a lot that's just not supposed to make sense. Now, this is the directorial debut of Kyle Edward Ball, who also did the screenplay. It's based on his 2020 short film Heck, which was kind of the proof of concept of this film. And Kyle Edward Ball was actually a YouTuber that would make all these short films, short horror films that were based on dreams that commenters would post. So he'd read the comments, he'd see this dream, he'd be like, okay, that's kind of creepy. He'd make a short film about it. I think this particular film, Skinamarink, is more about dreams that he had as a kid, and a lot of what this movie is, it does harken back to a lot of the primal fears of childhood fears, childhood paranoia, kind of how scary the world or your own home can be when it's unfamiliar when you're a young child. I mean, the main character is supposed to be a 4-year-old boy, so maybe the way the film is presented is like through the eyes of a 4-year-old, and just a lot of the things that are happening is what I think is sort of how a 4-year-old would process, his own fear. Now, well, before I get into that, now it stars Lucas Paul, Dolly Rose, Tetrault, Ross Paul, and Jamie Hill. Jamie McRae did the cinematography. It was edited by Kyle Edward Ball. It is actually a IFC Midnight film, which, of course, follow my channel. Next to A24, IFC and IFC Midnight is my favorite company. I think they put out a lot of really fantastic independent films that most modern audiences can't comprehend or won't give a chance. Now, this would be considered a experimental horror film. And this is probably the definition of an experimental horror film. It reminded me a lot of the 1989 film Begotten, which I have reviewed. That's one of my favorite horror films. I love Begotten. It reminded me of early David Lynch. This is like some of his earlier shorts, and Eraserhead also. The title Skinamarink comes from some song from Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Apparently that title or that song meant a lot more to Ball as a child, which leads me to believe that a lot of the imagery and a lot of the fear the film's trying to invoke, and maybe even some of the more dream related stuff, is more exclusive to Ball than maybe uh, sort of dreams at large. But the overall concept is okay, 4 year old Kevin, he's brought home from the hospital. He fell and hit his head. He's put to bed by his parents. He wakes up. It's just him and his sister. They're walking around the house. They realize that their parents have vanished. So they walk around the house. They try to find their parents. And gradually, windows, doors, whatnot start to vanish as well. So it kind of. And it goes between walking around the house, them deciding to sleep near each other downstairs in the living room while they play these old uh, 30s and 40s public domain cartoons, which one of which there was two cartoons that I recognized because I watched them a lot as a kid. Somewhere in Dreamland, and one called Presto Changeo, which is the second appearance of Bugs Bunny when he's the magician's rabbit that just fucks with these two dogs. And when I first heard the music, because a lot of the audio is coming from something off screen, so there's something on the TV. Some shots we see the TV, most shots we just hear the audio. I heard the music and I was like, that's that cartoon short I watched a lot as a kid. As I thought about that short, this film kind of reminds me of that short, kind of how, the laws of both logic and physics don't apply to this film, kind of like in that short with magic. Even to the point where, like, a doorway completely disappears. Now, the way it's presented, I know a lot of people have a hard time with. Because there are a lot of shots of, like, the corner of a ceiling or, like, way down low to the floor by the door. And you do get that for long periods of time. And I think what that's supposed to do is to sort of either create this stream of consciousness or to kind of put us into a trance, kind of hypnotize us, so that when there is dialogue or a noise or something, it is supposed to be jarring. And I will say that is different than a jump scare in Paranormal Activity. Paranormal Activity is something like nothing happening, then a door slams or a pot falls down. Here, you can't make out what the noise is. Also, with how it looks, apart from all those shots, is it does say it takes place in 1995, and maybe that is supposed to kind of put the viewer sort of back into their childhood, because it does have this incredibly gritty, grainy, fuzzy, just super degraded VHS look to it, which I'm a huge sucker for. I love films like that. But when most of the film is dark hallways, and yes, it is very hard to see what's going on, but I think that helps elicit that primal fear. It's like there was one shot sort of looking upward at this pantry, this linen closet that slides open, and the towels kind of fall down. But I was looking up at the top shelf, and it looked like there was a white pillow up there, but with how dark and fuzzy it was kind of tricking my mind and eyes into thinking it was kind of like this contorted sort of like ring girl. Like the white pillow was her body, and then like the shadow was her hair. She was all contorted. Maybe that is what was supposed to part of like the extreme darkness along with the real fuzzy look at the film. I think it's supposed to obscure a lot of the shots and the darkness to kind of trick you into what you're thinking, so that the dark kind of creates that fear that it had when you were a child. And that really worked for me. There were a lot of scenes, well, not a lot, there really is a lot of build-up. There is a lot of stream of consciousness kind of going on. But the scenes that did have creepy or unnerving, either visuals or audio were very effective. A lot of people questioned the use of subtitles, which, according to Ball, he wanted subtitles throughout, but he realized that there were some lines of dialogue that were so clear that he did feel the need for subtitles. But to me, I was kind of looking at it as, because I was kind of coming at it from like a dream perspective. A lot of what you hear in a dream either doesn't make sense or you can't make out what it is. The fact that we don't ever really get to see people's faces in this, but when we do, it's all kind of distorted and weird. I think I kind of interpreted that a few different ways. One is, it's been said that when we dream, our minds can't make up faces that it hasn't seen before, or it has a hard time making out faces in general. So I kind of looked at it that way, but also I looked at it as, you coming from the child's perspective, he thinks his parents are gone. So when he does hear this voice or see this person, he doesn't know who it is. They're in the dark. Their mind probably sees some kind of monster, and so that's how I took it. And it does have creepy moments where like a lot of the dialogue is kind of like a kid being like, "Should we sleep downstairs tonight?" Or "Do you know where mom is?" And then there's a lot of audio that's just kind of, and then there's some subtitles. But then when you get like a really loud, clear piece of dialogue, like supposedly the father's voice being like, uh, "Look under the bed," that's kind of creepy. Or the scene where the boy goes to the parents' room and the mother is just sitting on the bed, back to, not really answering the kid, and then she just says, "Look away," or like, "Don't look," or something. So like, the camera peers away, and we hear like kind of like a scream and like bones crunching. Look back, she's gone. I mean, you could probably go on for hours about the interpretations of this film, or what it's trying to say, or what it's trying to do. For me, I really enjoyed the experiment. I really liked, all these weird, weird angles, and they were all done for a purpose. Uh, what Ball did say he was influenced by people like David Lynch, Stanley Kubrick. Um, he even said one of his main inspirations on this film was the original Black Christmas. And there were some odd kind of shots that did remind me of Black Christmas as I was watching it. Um, I do think that the completely uh, hard, hard to see, really obscured, degraded look of the film really helped kind of to put us back into that childlike fear of not knowing what's in the dark, and also not knowing, where there's really no shot in this film where something is perfectly center. It's always off or askew in a way so that you don't really know where to place your focus. And I think that really helped kind of, am I supposed to look over here? Am I supposed to look over there? I mean, I can make out what this is, so I'm going to look at this, but there's this black void, and I kind of don't want to look at it because of how the film looks. It is really creepy, and you can't make out what's in the dark, or you are looking at something, but because of how the film looks and how dark it is, it kind of makes it look like something else. And I do think it did a good job at sort of placing us back into that primal childhood fear. And maybe the gritty, grainy look, apart from just obscuring the visuals, is also to send us back into that um, kind of look at it through a nostalgia goggles. Kind of make us feel kind of sort of further help us put us back to when we were 4 or 5 years old. And I thought it worked. I'm a huge sucker for experimental films. Uh, I do think that film can be played with a lot, uh, especially to elicit different feelings or emotions with visuals. So I love films like this. If I had any complaints about this, I would probably say, yeah, it is a little too long. I'm not saying this has to be a short film, even though I do think it probably would have worked best as a short film. But maybe they could have found a way to make it work as a 75 or 80 minute, bare minimum for a feature length. Uh, I would say I am kind of jaded to the idea that I think one of the reasons why this movie's getting so much hate, at least from audiences, because critics are loving it. Uh, do I think it's the scariest thing ever made? Like they're saying, absolutely not. Uh, I was tempted to put it in, I think, one of the best as far as just raw reactions to a horror film that I've had, probably in the 2020s at least. I really did enjoy it. But I think the reason why a lot of audiences are just hating the shit out of this movie is because, one, the the critics are praising it, which means they automatically hate it. It is an experimental, more artistic film, which there are a few things unrelated to the film that just makes me love it even more, and that's the fact that because it's so degraded looking and so fuzzy and grainy and hard to see, is that modern audiences who can't stand a movie unless it's super crisp, ultra 4K, HD, that even if they buy this film on that format, it's still going to be gritty and fuzzy. I love that. Um, same with the audio, but also, you know, uh, which also, anytime a movie is not shot like that and tries to do something with the visuals, it is considered artsy, pretentious, which used to mean it was just good and ambitious, but no. So, I mean, most modern audiences need to be spoon fed. They need to be spoon fed everything that's happening. They need to know everything that's happening. They don't like to think. They don't like to uh, analyze or interpret or try to give into the film what it's trying to do. I mean, they would much rather watch a generic turd, like, say, you know, keeping it with the last few years. There's something like Smile or the upcoming Scream 6, you know, just complete generic horror. I think most modern audiences react to that just because, one, this is the age of, excuse me, of instant gratification. So, yeah, that's why a lot of generic films like that get praised, and a lot of more artistic films that are trying to do something, that are trying to do something different, maybe elicit different feelings and emotions, while actually using the medium of film, which is uh, of audios and visuals, without plot or narrative. Really, just going off the idea of the primal childhood fear or childhood interpretation of fear or interpretation of you what's going on in their own home when something's a little scary or off, the interpretation of what's in the dark. And I think that's why the house itself is kind of getting scarier each as it goes on, because the kids, the longer their parents are gone, the scarier it gets. And now the more they feel trapped in this home, and now the house feels scarier. Some things I couldn't tell you what it means. Like towards the end, it does say like day 572 or something. Could I? I really do feel like this is just supposed to be like a sort of dream recreation or something like that. And I do look at this film as something like Begotten or Eraserhead. So I really enjoyed this film. I did watch a few reviews, and some of the people I watch, they hated it for the reasons that I said. You know, they hate the way it looks. They don't like to really think about the interpretations or even really think about at the most surface level what the filmmaker's trying to do. You know, maybe they would have liked it more if the kid like strapped on a headband, uh, pulled out like a toy gun, and said some stupid corny line like "soda's about to go pop, a motherfucker." I've seen reaction videos where people get all hyped over a line like that. But you know, I am a huge sucker for not only just how it looks, and I also knew I was gonna love this film during the opening credits, with just sort of like that shaky, fuzzy, font with like the copyright down underneath it. I was like, okay, this is sort of a throwback, but I think this did do a good job at sort of putting us into a nightmarish dreamscape, or even that of a child's, sort of a child's dreamscape, and sort of their interpretation of fear, darkness, interpretation of the situation. Um, yeah, I do think it did a good job at sort of toying with our heads, our minds, our eyes, our ears, really tricking us into hearing and seeing things that might not even be there. And yeah, there is a lot of stream of consciousness going on with very long, almost hypnotic shots. But I thought it worked. So really, my only complaint is, yeah, it was a tad long. They could have made this, probably, uh, probably 70 to 80 minutes. They could have found a way to make that work. And I thought the sound of the old cartoons in the background kind of added to the creepiness. So that worked for me as well. I really did like this film. I really appreciated what the director was going for. The experiment worked for me. I would say, as far as films for the 2020s, this one did elicit one of the more raw reactions as far as fear or just unnerved or being unsettled, and at the same time not even really knowing what I was seeing. So I actually hope for more films like this. I would take a film like this over a film like Smile any day. Even if I don't even know what they're going for, I'll take something like this over something like Smile or Scream 6. Yes, just because it's different doesn't mean it's good, but a lot of times stuff that I've seen that's different, as long as there's a purpose behind it, and if I can understand where they're coming from, then for me it works. And these are a lot of the newer films I'd much rather see. So that's 2022's Skinamarink. I was going to say couldn't really tell you where that title comes from or why it applies, but I think it is more specific to the director. But yeah, really enjoyed this film. I'm sure the comments are going to be flooded with people saying that they hated it, but in the world of modern audiences that need to be spoon-fed, need everything to be crystal clear as far as how it looks, and as generic as all hell, this just isn't for them. For people that don't, this is more for people that like to think, like to interpret, like to, kind of be challenged by a film, I guess, and that's why it worked for me. So 2022's Skinamarink. Thank you for watching.